morning, everyone, and good afternoon to those of you in other time zones. Welcome to the Living in Oneness Summit. I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Coordinating Director for Humanities Team, and I'm really excited about today's program. I'm going to be interviewing a very special guest today, James O.D. Over 3,400 are registered for today's call, so we have a great listening audience. James is an important leader in today's world, and we're really grateful to have him with us. He rose from a boy in the United Kingdom, intensely interested in social responsibility, to a leader embodying deep mystical teachings, but also focused on powerful social activism. During his career, he ascended to lead the Amnesty International office in Washington, D.C., the SIVA Foundation, and then led the Institute of Noetic Sciences, serving as their president. He presently leads the Peace Ambassador training for Shift Network and is based in Crestone, Colorado. James, would you like to come in to say hi real quick before I'll bring you on in a moment, but want to come in to say hi real quick?
Well, thank you, and so great to be with you again. And what a wonderful community you have of really conscious people.
Well,
congratulations also on the awards your nonprofit is getting.
Thank you so much, James, and so wonderful to have you with us. A little about Humanities Team as we get started. In Humanities Team, we see there is only one presence, the divine, and we see we are all offspring, embodiments, and expressions of the divine. Of course, this is true for all of life, not just humanity. This has repercussions for how we see ourselves, others, and the earth that is our home. In short, this means that everyone and everything is sacred and should be treated as such. It also means we are responsible for the world around us because, in truth, it is part of that which is dearest to us, our true self. In addition to the Living in Oneness Summit, the focus of today's call, we convene Global Oneness Day, conscious business programs, prayer and meditation calls, service projects globally, and much more. I mentioned just a moment ago this is a Living in Oneness Summit call. The Living in Oneness Summit is now a year-round program. All programs are free and are recorded, so you can listen in for free for 48 hours following each call if you miss one. Each month, we are interviewing key leaders who will share about living in oneness in our own life, with our partner, as a parent raising children in our home, in the workplace, and as a public service leader. Today, we'll talk in particular about living as one in our own life and as a public service leader. Thank you so much for being here for this important call. Please go ahead and get comfortable as we get started. Also, just to share in a little bit, once we get a half hour, 40 minutes into this call, we're going to be giving away 6 copies of James' newest book. So be sure to pay attention for that if you'd like to read the book. And the book is spectacular. I'd now like to introduce our special guest. James O.D. is award-winning author of Cultivating Peace, Creative Stress, The Conscious Activist, Where Activism Meets Mysticism, and other works. He is lead faculty for Shift Network's acclaimed Peace Ambassador training. He has conducted frontline social healing dialogues for many years. He is a former president of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, Washington Office Director of Amnesty International, and CEO of the SIVA Foundation. He offers consulting and leadership intensives at his mountain home in Crestone, Colorado. You can learn more about him at his website, jamesod.com, and that's spelled O-D-E-A.com. Welcome to the Living in Oneness Summit, James, and it is so great to have you with us.
Great to be here for this very important topic.
Yes, it is. Wow. Well, let's go right into it because there's so much to cover here. You've recently written this book called The Conscious Activist, Where Activism Meets Mysticism. It's a very important book. Marianne Williamson had this to say about it. After reading The Conscious Activist, you will drop to your knees in heart-opening awe, and then you will rise to your feet, inspired to act in a truly transformational way. And as you know, James, I've read the book, and I couldn't agree with Marianne more. James, what was your vision when you started writing this book?
It was really to look at that journey between the journey from me to we, the journey from initiation to deep integration, and to look at it through the lens of experience and concept, rather than just presentation of concept. And I wrote it at this time because it is an epic and pivotal time to integrate what we know in the transcendental and spiritual realms with what we know in the immanental and the present and external realms of systems and people and processes around the world. It's the time of that deep integration that is called for. And that's why the book is written, because without that integration, we're careening towards one disaster after another.
Yes, we are. That's so true. We were sharing just before this call as we were chatting that this is the epic moment here on planet Earth, isn't it? Because this whole time for awakening oneness in ourselves and in the world is absolutely here. And that's exactly what this book talks about. In Humanities Team, we, as we talk about awakening oneness in ourselves and in the world, we always talk about then the two programs that we create. The first one, Inner Journey, which is about our own path where we're living as one, going within and connecting with the divine. And then that always leads naturally to the second path, which is this activist path where we see ourselves and the world around us. And, of course, there's so many people and things in need in the environment and our Earth, the ecosystem. And, of course, the book talks about both of these things so beautifully. Can you share just a little, you might want to bring in, maybe a story or two from your book. I'm going to call out specific things in a little bit because there were many pages that I dog-eared and highlighted myself. But are there things you'd like to mention here as we get started, James?
Well, I'd like to mention this sense that you have two journeys, and they're seemingly at first contradictory, but both pivotal and necessary. One is that journey inward, and it's the journey of the spiritual realm into the subtle planes of existence. And that has its own requirements, very special requirements. In some ways, it calls upon you to withdraw from the ways of the world and the linearity of the world and begin to trust deeply your own subjective process and the deep reality that exists on the inner plane. It's like going through one door after another until you reach a point where you understand the language of the subtle planes, and its abiding reality, as you say, is abiding reality in oneness. And then you have an almost seemingly contradictory impulse, which is to go out into the world, a world that is suffering, a world that is in great need, and to create linear goals and objectives to improve that world, to express moral conscience in a way that can define change, that can save trees, save animals, save lives, stop torture. It's full of agendas and work to be done and benchmarks to achieve. And there comes a point when, as you say, in the mature search, when you get on the path of deeper and deeper integration, these two worlds come together as if they should never have been separated, as if our destiny is to become conscious activists, to be soulful servants of the oneness of all.
Yes, so true, and I suspect that all of the listeners on this call, can immediately are connecting with what you're sharing, James. That's the journey, isn't it? That the journey inward, and the journey inward leads us outward because where we're in touch with our divine self and where we see that same divine self in each other. How can we be anything other than helpful to those people and those things in need?
I would just say, however, that there are let's call them traps or dangers in both paths, because there is a danger of the inward transcendental journey as taking you away from the world and its suffering, and simply saying that if we meditate and learn that inner language, it's naturally going to happen that we will go out into the world. I think what you're referring to is a very advanced stage, and the same with going out into the world and taking it all on. It has its dangers that you can take on too much, you can project all the problems as outward, fixable, when in fact they need to be worked on in terms of transformation of consciousness itself. And that transformation of consciousness has that both and quality of both the inner and the outer. So I like to think that this book guides you through some of the challenges and dangers and opportunities of taking on a path of deep integration, of inspired action in the world, and ecstatic spirituality.
Yes, boy, thank you for highlighting that, because for me, that is the beautiful thing about this book, is these developmental stages that we go through as a mystic, as a social activist, as a spiritually conscious social activist. You just bring out so many of your own stories, and then you bring in all of these other spiritual leaders to talk about their lives lived or their stories, ways that they connected with you that were helpful, such as when Jean Houston connected with you when you were at Amnesty International. And I love it that it starts right at the beginning when you were a boy and you went away to I'm not sure it was seminary, but something like that, where you take us through your process where you were just a very young person and already beginning to look out in the world as a spiritually conscious social activist, and then like you say, all of the traps along the way, the challenges, and you do such a beautiful job of explaining both the trap and the solution, the thing that you came to understand, the particular teaching that helped pull you through the trap and then move you on to the next step in the journey. The book is just rich with treasure like that.
Thank you. One of the things that I want to affirm now, that I think the book really affirms, is the nature of childhood spirituality. We have got to stop talking down to our children. We've got to get out of the fix that cognitive psychology has put us in. Now, we all fundamentally agree with cognitive psychology. It says there are developmental stages for us knowing cognitive categories, from one category to the other, and one precedes the other. I accept that, and that's generally accepted. But spirituality does not follow the same rules. Of course we develop spiritually, but what I'm talking about is that spirituality is access to oneness, is access to that state of wholeness, that radiant intuition, that we're connected to something way beyond the linear story. And we get glimpses and intuitions and feelings and resonances of this reality as children, and that if we deny this reality, we're really dumbing down the spirituality of children. And in my case, I was grateful both to my parents and then as a very young person at the seminary, for the intensity of the spiritual process that was given to me, the deep spiritual practices of awakening the heart, of staying heart-centered, the prayer of the heart, all of those wonderful things that give us the opening to go deeper and deeper into spiritual arousal. Don't you think this is an important theme?
Oh my gosh, yes it is, absolutely. This kids, of course, are born into the world with, especially, mature kids, but even my son who's less mature, who just intuitively go within and just bring these things straight out of the universe that they're connected to in this whole old world style where we used to say, listen to me, this is what we need to do, where we're talking down and the absolute instructor to our kids is so damaging because they are in touch with the divine, and there's so much they can share. And also this, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but you were mentioning, also education, which is so cognitive based now, as opposed to education where we're tuning in to the divine within and where everything is present.
I describe in the book, my prayer at age 7 to God saying, I just cannot believe in you if you punish the devil for all eternity. I had, as a child, an instinctive knowing that the loving, beneficent, compassionate force that guides the universe could not be into eternal torture. And how about that? That this is the prayer of a child who then spends much of his life opposing torture and fighting against human rights abuses. The threads of connection are so profound.
Yes, I remember that. I love that. That was such an earnest prayer, and then sure enough, this path was laid out right in front of you to journey into who you've become, and really sharing early on with God. These teachings of damnation and hell and duality and etc. I can't buy into that. And that's the beauty of this book too. Is that it's not just like an academic book that just intellectually lays out perspectives. It's the story of your life, and I love that, where you share from the time you were a young man to today what this journey has been, and again, the challenges, the victories, the people that you were in touch with, visiting Dalai Lama's compound. You mentioned twice, but the first visit and what you learned there, bringing in Gandhi's teachings, bringing in Gene Houston's teachings, a contemporary who was in touch with you and who had so much impact on you. The I Ching, bringing that in with how it served you, and then Sequoia Trueblood, this remarkable Native American activist and leader who's been such a good friend, and the journey with him around the world. It's just so amazing. It really holds you right on the edge of your seat.
Well, thank you. And when we start early in the book with that childhood spirituality and then the fall from grace, it leads to a discussion around what is guidance. As you said, here I journey through many realms in my life, but early on it was as if that I learned something about the nature of guidance, which is that when we fall, the guidance is there. The deep witness of our soul is watching, is eternally guiding us through these processes. So I like to say that I think of guidance as being there through thick and thin, through the dark tunnels, until we see the beauty of the light ahead. It's not an on-off switch. It's not we're guided and then the guidance goes away when we fall from grace. We all have our learning curves, and it's really seeing that even when we fall, something so profound is being offered to us. Something is being opened up to us. When we hit the wall, whether it's as children or adolescents or adults, again and again, we discover that that wall is made up of every choice we've ever made, of who we are, of what our soul's destiny work is centrally about. And so I like to emphasize again that sense of a guidance guiding us through both the bitter and the sweet.
Yes, and it is so much a function of just building a relationship with guidance, with the divine. That, for me, the more I use it, the more it's there, the more I trust it, the closer I get. So true. By the way, let me just bring in the name of this book for those that aren't familiar with it. It's called The Conscious Activist, Where Activism Meets Mysticism. We're going to be giving away 6 copies of the book here in a little bit, so stay tuned. But invite you as well to you can go to James O.D.'s site, and again, that's odea.com, to buy the book. You can go to Amazon or your neighborhood bookstore. I'm sure this book is out there. It's an incredible book. And for all of us that are on this journey home in oneness, in the divine, there just are so many stories that are told, and so many things, so much wisdom that is here that talks about these developmental stages as we're journeying home in oneness. I wanted to bring in near the beginning of your book, James. You say that I think you dedicate the book to the torchbearers for justice, for healing, and for unconditional love. It is time to pass through the flames together. The garden of the future we have longed for now draws near. That's a very visionary statement, isn't it? And clearly that's what you're feeling.
Yes, and, Rumi says, those who jump in the water may end up in the fire, but those who jump in the fire will end up in the water. And it's a fire of purification. Purification for me is not just about getting holier at all. It's about getting more whole, more integrated, more connected to that oneness that you speak of. And so I think that's a central aspect of understanding that the fire we have to go through can burn away our ego. Even as an early adolescent in London, when I got a Teenager of the Year award for service to senior citizens, the government wrote to me and said, it seems as if you've got a strong critique of our treatment of and programs for senior citizens. Would you, come and meet the minister, or the senior government official? And I wrote back and said, you know what you have to do, and when you do it, we can meet. And I discovered early in life that that's the arrogance, that's the high horse, the self-righteous, finger-pointing person can get into when they get into the field of action. Like, I'm on the side of right and you're wrong, and I won't dialogue you until you do what has to be done. That is adolescent behavior. What we need and what we learn as mature activists is to stop polarizing the world into the righteous and the unrighteous. It is to really create the dialogic and healing context for a new construction of meaning that includes all. For the change will come from both inside the military and outside the military. It will come from inside the banks and outside of the banks. It will come from everywhere. It won't just come from some small group of people who think they're righteous, finger pointing at others. This is a major theme that develops through the book, how we stop that kind of activism that polarizes. At the same time, I hope the book is a hymn to the fact that so much can be achieved when you step into a reality that unites your passion with moral conscience. There can be a lot of passion in the world, but the poet Yeats, the Irish poet Yeats, says somehow to beware of mere passionate intensity unless it is connected into the realm of moral conscience. When we get those two together, we can really, really transform the ills of the world.
Yes, wow, I want to go deeper on this, but before we do, let me just share, we do have questions coming in here. Thank you so much to all of you, the listeners that are participating. We'll be sure to get to one or two here during the hour. As you were speaking, James, it reminded me of also when you were at Amnesty International and you had this large document, an important document coming out that was going to be well followed. I think it was on incarceration or the death penalty. And at that time, I think you reached out to Jean Houston, sent her a copy, and then you were in touch with her. And she was I think, reviewing some of the key points that you're making here now, that just coming from the place of righteousness was going to perpetuate the problem. You want to bring that in? It was
yes.
A powerful moment in the book as I was reading.
It was a report on the death penalty in the United States, and it was a report of botched executions, horrible suffering of people who were mentally retarded getting executed, of one man who'd been hit repeatedly by his father with a baseball bat over the head as a child, becoming violent and demented himself. It was full of images like that. And Jean said, "I'm sorry to tell you that the imagery you're using, the language you're using, is the language that conditioned people in violence in the first place. I ask you, James, to find a language of human possibility." And for Jean Houston, when she talks about human possibility, she's written about the possible human and the possible society. She means not a flippant kind of possibility, but a deep charged possibility. She uses the Greek word entelechy from Aristotle, and it's a word that the acorn has this entelechy to become an oak tree. The acorn has the possibility, the latent field, charged resonance to become a mighty oak tree. It's that kind of possibility we speak of, not some fanciful maybe, could be, would be, should be, but will be if we do the work that is needed. And Jean is a master evocateur of human possibilities, of human capacities. And when those human capacities unite in a field of love and action, then I think we have the code we need for transformation.
Yeah, it's such an important point. Gosh, I would love to put, and probably will put this book in my friends' hands who are social activists without the mystical component, because just as you share, what we resist persists, and we can be righteous about it, and we can push against it all we want, but all we're doing is really feeding what's already there, if that's our approach. Let me bring in, again, there's so many points here from the book that I thought were really great. You brought in the Buddha and his life, which, of course, is about non-resistance. But you mention in the book that, in at least in one case, resistance is good when you're not going to let people be oppressed. So, this is, again, bringing in these stories from spiritual leaders, from contemporaries, from your own life. It's so powerful as you're talking about your own journey in oneness that brought you from a young man winning this award in the United Kingdom through these positions of power in the United Kingdom and the United States to where you are now in Crestone, Colorado, where you lead these consulting and leadership intensives.
When I met the senior tutor of the Dalai Lama, Ling Rinpoche, in his previous incarnation, he has since then reincarnated and is now about 28 years old. But when I met him, I experienced that stillness of being, that connection with all. And he looked at me, and I saw in his being the emptiness, the stillness, the non-reactivity. And he said to me, "Serve all beings without distinction." I realized that was the direction I was eventually going to take my activism. because eventually in the activism that I have worked on, I've moved to a place where I look and envisage the healing of the perpetrator as well as the victim. The compassion must embrace the ignorance of the perpetrator. The compassion must embrace the woundedness of the perpetrator. And our task, our mighty task at this time in history, is to convene that depth spiritual compassion for the brokenness of the system, of the things that have led us into destroying our own habitat the way we have done. And so our task is to end the transmission, the intergenerational transmission of wounds. And I believe that this synthesis of activism and mysticism is what we need to bring about that kind of consciousness that will be healing, integrating, gathering the momentum for the enterprise of oneness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was such a powerful part of the book. In fact, I only wrote down one quote directly from the book for this call, and that was the quote, "Serve all beings without distinction," that was shared during that visit to the Dalai Lama's compound in India. That was really a unique, it was a beautiful thing where I could kind of ride along on your shoulders and experience what you experienced there. I'm going to go to a question from a listener here in 1 minute, but before I do, we're talking about The Conscious Activist, Where Activism Meets Mysticism. It's James O'Dee's newest book, and what a powerful book that it is. James, I wanted to ask you, because, of course, you are leading this peace activist training now for the Shift Network, and you're working with newer leaders on the path and also elders on the path. What are some of the things that you might recommend to them? You kind of, in this book, lay out all of this, your spiritual toolkit, that all of the things, the lessons learned along the path to be this conscious activist that you are today. What are there maybe one or two things that you might want to single out here now for all of the listeners on this call?
Well, a friend of mine was listening to the news recently, and the news was about what America was doing or had done in torture work. It was called the Torture Report, I believe, but it was about those secret detention centers and activities of torture that were engaged upon. And he became very depressed, that his own government had engaged in these activities. And he picked up my book, and he was reading in some of the latter chapters his reference to the mystic Muhyiddin Ibn al-Arabi, 13th century Sufi mystic. And Ibn al-Arabi says, "The cause of love is beauty." Now here we have the comparison between beauty and something that is endlessly ugly and deformed, which is to torture another human being. And so I would say to those who are on the path, who are living at this time, and see the beheadings and the torture, who see the ruin of the environment, who see the conscious acquisition of greed, still, in the midst of all of that, go find the beauty, see the beauty. It is the beauty that will cause the love and integration to arise. There is beauty everywhere. There is beauty in nature. There is beauty in human beings. There is beauty in human beings who have done terrible things. There is beauty everywhere. Everywhere you look, everywhere you turn, is the face of God. Look for it, find that beauty. It is that beauty that will carry you home through the darkest tunnel of despair. And I'm not saying that your heart should not be broken open, by what is happening. But it should never become so fixated by the ugly that you lose the beauty. My life, my work has taken me through torture places, places of massacre, places of tremendous human suffering. But I always know that that's not the end of the story. I am one of those who bear witness to the birth of something truly transcendental and beautiful in the human imagination and in the human capacity to do good. I've seen prisoners released from endless years of suffering because people activated their conscience to stop it. I've seen blind, tens of thousands, millions of blind people receive their sight back because the work was organized to do so. I've seen micro-lending happen in so many places where the finances and the money and the resources of the world are redistributed beautifully and efficiently. All of the solutions are there for us if we really look for them at this time.
Yes, they are. Gosh, the accounts that you share of things that you experienced, because, of course, you were leading the Washington office for Amnesty International, and a story you shared of traveling with the wife of this Nicaraguan leader who had been captured, this magnificent man, very courageous, doing this incredible work in Central America that was dropped in shark-infested waters. Oh, my God, you just, cringe reading, many of these stories. But just like you said, like you're sharing here now, there's so many examples of beautiful things, of healing, of courage that's creating healing in the world. Let me go to a question that kind of relates to this. This is from Annalise in Germany. She says, what are your words of wisdom and compassion to face violence in the world? Still, as a humanitarian, I can't cope when looking at other people who are suffering or being abused.
Yes, well, I think that's a central question at this time, as we see that graphic forms of violence and abuse. I mean, we have to know about it. We cannot turn away from it. So my aikido on this, Annalise, is to look at the problem and let it go through me, let it affect me. But to put my energy into the solution. So I think if we look away and we deny the reality, we're not fully participating in the conscious transformation that is needed. And the stories that we've heard from Syria and Iraq have been truly mind-tormenting. And yet, where is our energy going? What happens as a problem or a crisis for us if our energy gets sucked into the problem? Then we have a kind of deep entropy. We get paralysis. We can't move. We don't know what to do. We're broken. We feel despair. So it's a kind of aikido. It's a sophisticated work for mature seekers and activists. Look at the problem, know the problem, and put your energy into the solution.
Yes, let me read another question. This book, I think, would be marvelous for you, Barbara. This is Barbara's in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. She says, I've spent a lot of time going within and being aware of what's out there. I've also been ill. I wonder what your thoughts are on how one lives with inspired action in the world when aware but unable to get out there. I've been introduced as a social activist but don't really see it. Can we hold a place of peace within and know that alone we're having impact?
Yes. There's a chapter in the book called Sacrifice. And as you know, since you read it, it's about taking our activism all the way right to our own doorstep. I call that, in some senses, domestic activism. And it talks about when in my own family we went through separation and divorce. But we did so in a way that left each of the players in a state of wholeness and connection. It sounds baffling that that could happen, but in fact it can, and I encourage you to read that chapter, Barbara, of the book. That sometimes the great work is the work that's done right in the nearest relationship to us. It is healing in our own families, the intergenerational transmission of wounds. It is finding our voice for those that meet us and greet us. It's right there in that intimate reality that so much can be done. And small things from a spiritual perspective are as great as big things. I really want to tell you that is a spiritual truth. Small things are not small at all in an interconnected universe. So small acts of mercy, of connection, of forgiveness, of reconciliation, of deep truth-telling, all of these things are part of the activism that we now talk about as conscious activism.
Yes, and we are talking about James O'Dee's newest book, The Conscious Activist, Where Activism Meets Mysticism, and it just is a marvelous book that talks about these developmental stages that we traverse as we navigate this path as a mystic and as a social activist. I want to invite Nanette Kennedy and Dee Meyer, my partners, to come in. They're going to handle this book giveaway and just share how this works. And Nanette, do you want to come in first?
Sure. The first three people who raise their hands on the phone call by pushing 1 or 2 will receive James' book, The Conscious Activist, Where Activism Meets Mysticism. So raise your hands, and the first 3 people that do that will be the winners.
Okay. Wonderful. So if you're on Maestro, 1 or 2, push 1 or 2, and Nanette will come on. We'll get your address so we can ship this book off to you. And Dee Meyer, would you like to come in and talk to those that are on the webcast?
Great. The first 3 people who submit a comment, book, and include their email address will receive James' book.
Okay, awesome. So if you're on the webcast in the question window, put book, and the first 3 that come up there will also be reaching out to you to get your address so we can ship this book off to you. So
and I guess,
yes, please, James.
I guess we should tell people they're signed copies.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that in. These are all autographed by James. These are signed copies. So I'm quite sure we've probably got far more hands going up than we have books. But if you don't win a book, I invite you to order this book. It's one for your library. It just lays out so well these challenges that we encounter, what James is calling traps that are along the path, and ways that we can get through them or go around them and just journey on this path home into oneness. It's just a remarkable book. James, what there's so many things I would love to get to. Your travels with Sequoia Trueblood, including to this community down in Central America, was so remarkable. But I want to allow a little time at the end to share of some coming programs. And I want to tell people about Community Circle, a new program within Humanities Team here in 1 minute, too. So as we just wrap up this discussion about this exciting book, are there a couple other things that come to you that we might want to share with listeners here?
Well, at the end of the book, I talk about some qualities of the conscious activist. I talk about humility, because this is a term that I think gets confused and abused. And what I want to say about humility, others have said, but I'm going to say in my own way, that it's really not about stepping aside for others to do. It's not about diminishing yourself in any way. Humility, that state of being where you have such trust in what has been given to you to be and to do, that you stand in the power of that. You stand in the power of who you are, not self-effacing, less than, more than, too much. All those are quantitative aspects that the ego will latch onto. But the divine made you, created you for a particular reason, and your qualities are the qualities that we need at this time. So stand in the power of your own being. And there is another concept I refer to as equipoise, which is that balance of the inner and the outer, balance of being that are required to do this mature work. And I also talk about resolution. Long for resolution. Live for resolution. If we don't have resolution of the story, it's simply a nightmare. So we want to come out of the nightmare. We do that by longing for resolution, by putting our imaginative energy and vitality of spirit and ingenuity and creativity of being into resolving what can be resolved. You know, I tell the story in the book of a man who spent 18 years in a dungeon in the Atlas Mountains. And through our efforts he was released, and in fact that dungeon was closed down. And a year after he was released, he came to visit me in Washington to thank us for his life. What a story of human endeavor, that we could close down a dungeon, that a man who'd been fed slops for 18 years would come to thank us. And I took him to the local Mexican restaurant for lunch, and he was confused, and I tried to explain fajitas and enchiladas and all of that. And he looked at me and he said, "My friend, food is beautiful." And I was so profoundly touched by that understanding, that moment when someone who has been tortured and oppressed for all those years, the story is resolved. Human beings activated passion, power, conscience to change the story. And so I say, the conscious activist is being birthed at this time. The integration of spirituality and action is being given to us because we can resolve our hatreds, we can resolve our conflicts, we can resolve all of the greed and unskillful behavior. We can end the transmission of wounding, and we can find the inherent beauty that is stirring the whole universe into existence.
Yeah, and this is such an important time. I think, I'm guessing all of the listeners on this call, we can all feel that this is the epic moment here on the earth. James, we were talking about this just before the call, that and it's been described in so many different ways, this birth that is happening, this awakening that's occurring. But we can all feel that the earth is at this epic moment in its evolution where we're becoming conscious and living as part of the divine. And the frustration that we so often hear on these calls and the questions that come in is, when is it going to happen? When will I get my friends back? Because a lot of times people feel isolated on this journey. And of course, the when is answered by each of us. We all are helping to birth this child to awaken ourselves and the world, and that's why it's so important that we embody it, we live it. It is ultimate reality. I'm guessing for all of us on this call, we see that oneness and wholeness and unity are real. That it is the true reality, and duality isn't real. But if it's real, then we have to live it, and if we're going to live it, then spiritual tools are so valuable, and stories that can be there as almost an elder, that stands with us and that shares, this was the jam I got into, and this is how I got out, and these divine dichotomies that you discuss, James, in your book. So I love this book. I think this is a book for our library, for all of us that are on navigating this path back home in oneness, living as part of the divine. There are so many wonderful stories and so many tools here that can guide us. Let me announce the winners here real quick. The people that were on the call: Miranda Laurel, Diane Beal, Roland Blue, and then on webcast, Penny in Boulder, Christopher in Milwaukee, and Book, or Donald. And I'm not sure where Donald lives, but so congratulations to all of you who won a free copy of the book signed by James O.D., and to others of you who didn't, I highly recommend this book, and you can pick it up. Again, you can go to James' website or to Amazon or go to your favorite bookstore. James, we still have a couple of minutes before I'm going to share some announcements. Do you, your own invitation here, I know that your work is about providing spiritual tools to people that are new to the path, to elders on the path, people that are intending to live as one, as a conscious activist. Do you have some invitations you'd like to extend here?
I'd like to invite us to remember that there are many streams of spirituality, and that the confluence, the coming together of those streams doesn't dilute one or the other. And we can learn from Sufis, Buddhists, Baha'is. We can learn from each other in so many different streams. Important stream that I also track in the book is the indigenous one. And there's that moment when I'm with the Koki people on the mountain in Colombia, and these are sometimes called the Buddhists of the indigenous people, highly therapeutic, highly meditative people. And I gave a wristband from Tibet to one of the elders, and he touched it and felt it, and he was calling in its origins, its vibrations, its source, and he was honoring that. And I thought it was a beautiful moment to remind us that these possessions that we have are all coming from a deeper source, and that by exploring the mother and the father, the origins, the roots of things, we find our relationship restored to them, not just as mere objects at all. And that's an invitation at this point, is to sacralize, make sacred our relationship to things. We don't have a sacred relationship to them. We have an acquisitive relationship. We have an ownership, dominating relationship. And things will change rapidly when you have that relationship to the stuff around you and think of its origins. The book and the origins in the world of the trees. Somebody wrote a report on Amazon about the book, and it said, "This book is a book that a tree would give its life for." I almost wept for an hour. I was so moved by that statement that, in fact, a tree would give its life for a book like this. But it's to re-sacralize our relationship to everything in the world, so that when we step out the door, we're stepping into the healing of transformation of all the material realm and bringing the spiritual and sacred relationship, the eternal creative relationship, back to our world, where mind and matter, spirit and matter are once more reunited in the eternal dance of love and Shakti.
Oh, gosh, I love that story, and I think that's so true, James, that a book saying, if a tree could speak, it would say, I would give my life for this book, because I think that's true. And also that speaks to the theme of service and sacrifice that is throughout your book. So beautiful. And that's what oneness is, and where we look at, talk about responsibility for each other. For a tree to say that, and I believe a tree would say that. So it's such a marvelous book. This Living in Oneness Summit is about providing tools for living in oneness in different parts of our life. And when we talk about living in oneness in our own life and as a public service leader, this is such just a fabulous book. And the book addresses other dimensions to oneness as well, as James was referencing. It talks about when he and his wife became separated, how they raised their kids in one home, and the parents alternated living in the home. So it even talks about how we can live in oneness in our family in a difficult situation where parents are separating. Well, let me just share a little bit here. I want to get to a couple of important things before the end of the call. James, I want to say to you, as a thank you, a lot more coming before the call closes, but thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and for bringing this book to our attention, such a fabulous book and something that we certainly embrace here in Humanities Team. I want to also invite listeners to go to our website, the humanitiesteam.org website. There's a green button there that says Join Us, and if you click on that, it takes you into something called Community Circle, which is a program we just created for living in oneness, where we want to have this deeper and richer experience. And we provide MP3 links to our programs for the last several years, digital transcripts for the last several years. There's a private Facebook community, and there are phone calls, conference calls, lots of things. And it's only $10 a month. But also, beginning today, we're bringing back a 2-week free trial. So if you click on the Join Us button, you can even try it out for a couple of weeks before paying $10 a month. So for those of you journeying this path in oneness that might find that to be valuable, check that out. That's the Join Us button on the Humanities Team website. I want to share some coming calls that I want to invite you to next week on Friday, February 27th from 10 to 11 Pacific time. We're going to be talking to Andrew Harvey about a service project in India that he created. It's called the Kashmir Project. And Andrew was in India when a flood washed away many homes in this Kashmir area, homes and businesses. He was so personally impacted that he pledged $50,000 to help rebuild. We're going to talk about that project during the call next week. Again, that's Friday, February 27th from 10 to 11 Pacific time. Then a week later, on Thursday, March 5th, at 8:30 to 9:30 Pacific time, I'll be interviewing Dr. Urban Laszlo and his associate in Denmark about the Fuji Declaration. And the focus of the Fuji Declaration is awakening the divine spark in the spirit of humanity. It sees a civilization of oneness with diversity on planet Earth. The Fuji Declaration is being convened by the Club of Budapest and the Goy Peace Foundation. Hundreds of organizations and leaders around the world are participating, including Humanities Team. We see this as a historic collaboration, so don't miss that call on Thursday, March 5th from 8:30 to 9:30 Pacific time. If you go to the upcoming events section on the Humanities Team website in the lower right area, you'll see all of the calls. You can read about them briefly and also register for those calls. I also want to invite you to participate in Awakening Day. That's coming up here on March 12th. If you go to evolutionrevolution.net, you can learn about it. Awakening Day is a collaboration between our founder, Neil Donald Walsh, and Humanities Team. A very important day, and you can learn more about it, again, at evolutionrevolution.net. Then on Saturday, October 24th, is Global Oneness Day. You might want to put that on your calendar. That's a 12-hour free program, and that'll be truly amazing. I want to, James, thank you again for just this powerful hour. Thank you so much. Thank you for the free books and for taking us deep into the book here during the hour. I'm so grateful. I know all of the listeners are also, because we've gotten a lot of comments here in our and in our instant message window. I also want to thank my colleagues Nanette Kennedy and Dee Meyer, who are running the back end of this call, and they also help plan and organize this program. Finally, I want to thank each of you, the listeners, for being present with us here today. Gratitude to all of you. We're really grateful to have so many of you here with us today. In closing, I want to just share what we know, that we are already one. So let's live this way, let's embody it, and let's invite others to do the same. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. And James, again, thank you so much, and I will be in touch with you shortly. Okay, thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and take care. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Maestro Conference. Please enter the conference PIN number followed by the pound key.